Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I gotta tell you something, people. You know, when you've done over 1,000 shows, you always find really cool connections that your guests who have other connections that you wouldn't think. Like my guest today is part of a legendary band, and it turns out that he's connected to a guy who did my show 7 years ago named George Pelecanos, who, if you don't know, he wrote for Treme, which my guest was in. He co-created The Deuce, and he was novelist. And I believe you guys did a show. You know George Pelecanos, right?
Yeah, I do know George. Yeah, a very fine man.
Yeah,
Great writer as well. Great writer.
Didn't you guys do a show together or something at a pub in London? Or?
Well, yeah, George is over here with David Simon, actually, though David, alas, couldn't make it to the pub. I think it was George's birthday, if I remember rightly. And we did, it was essentially the Pogues. Yeah, it pretty much was the Pogues. We did a version of Down in the Hole, you know, the theme music to The Wire. I sang it, and yeah, it was good. Yeah, I like George.
Now,
he's a good guy.
Didn't you do some acting on Treme too?
Well, I mean, like, if you can call it that, I was very much a sort of a blink and you miss me. I played a street musician, a busker from London, and I was in a scene with Steve Earle. And then I was in another scene also with Steve Earle, and my wife was in it as well. Actually, we just on Frenchman Street in New Orleans. They just like, you know, I basically blagged the part.
Oh, there you
go. Just like to say, yeah. I was in Treme, but it was because it was around that time the Pogues played Voodoo Fest in 2009. And it was in 2010 that my wife and I, we bought a house in New Orleans, which we still have, where we lived pretty much from 2010 to 2018. We were in New Orleans pretty solidly.
What took you to New Orleans? Because me and my wife just went there a few years ago, and we had a blast. And it was hot as shit. We went in September; it was our anniversary. And you get off the plane. But what
we love the heat. That was actually one of the things that attracted us. It was just seemed like it was such a better alternative to, I don't know, the grey cold of London winters. We didn't actually quite realise that New Orleans itself can have quite grey cold winters, if you know. But it was we'd been looking for somewhere in the States. We were in a position where we had a bit of spare cash because the band was doing all these reunion shows. The dollar wasn't doing that well at that time against the pound, so you know we had some money put by, but we could just see that we were going to fritter it all away. So Louise had been looking at various places, the usual culprits, you know, New York and Los Angeles. Then we came to New Orleans, which I'd been to before, but she hadn't. I'd been with the band back in the 80s, and it was wild. It was and she really fell hard for it, and we came back again for the premiere of Treme in March 2010. We were about 5 or 6, and yeah, bought a place, and never regretted it for a moment.
That's awesome. So you have this tour come. I know you're coming through Philadelphia. You have the tour coming up. It's the 40th anniversary of Rum Sodom in the Lash. Did that all work in coordinates? How did this all start, and how did you put the band together to tour with? Because
this all came about really last year, which was the 40th anniversary of Red Roses for me. Tom Cole, who's the drummer in Fontaines DC, and a friend of his, this guy Campbell, who runs a sort of folk collective called Broadside Hacks here in London. They were doing a weekend of Irish music at a little folk club over in Hackney in East London, and they got in touch and they said, look, you know, we're doing this thing. It's 40 years since Red Roses for me came out. Would you like to do on the Friday evening of this weekend, would you like to do curate an evening based around Red Roses for me with, you know, you can use some of the people that we've got who are playing at this weekend anyway, you know. And I thought, yeah, this seems like a good idea. Didn't really think of you know, of asking any of the other Pogues. I thought they probably wouldn't be really that interested. James Walden, I asked our guitarist because he's always up for that kind of thing. But you know, the others, Jem's very busy. James is over in Los Angeles, so we certainly wouldn't have had the budget to fly him over or anything like that. Then we announced it without any sort of guests or anything like that being talked about, and it just sold out in literally in minutes. So we had to move it to a larger venue, got more money, decided, well, let's be a bit more ambitious, and I just kind of pulled this super group together, if you like. I got Jem Finer and James Fearnely on board. We had Tom Cole from Fontaines playing drums. That was sorted. I got Holly Mullino who plays in a band called Goat Girl, who are a really good band here in London. I got her playing bass. She's an absolutely fantastic bass player, and also like really invaluable when it comes to just kind of like holding everything together at rehearsals and making sure everyone is focused. One of those people that every band needs, just to sort of like, no, now's the time to concentrate and stop waffling, just get down and actually play. And she's great, and she's, as I say, a really fucking amazing bass player. And we had a couple of something that one of the things when the idea was put to me, one of the things that excited me about it was I saw, here's an opportunity to sort of like, we can get a piper and somebody play the uilleann pipes and have them all the way through the set. We can have like, in some respects, a more sort of like, I didn't really sort of plan it on being necessarily more traditional or anything like that, but I just thought there's a wider palette that can be used here. I think that's more what I'm trying to say. Also, I wanted to have a lot of women involved because I think it's very important to have that dynamic and that balance, and the sound of female voices as well. I think is very important, and I think our music. I think the Pogues songs work very well coming with it being sung by a female, but with the words sound right in a woman's voice, if that makes any sense at all.
Okay, well, here's something I want to ask you. So you got all these people together. How long does it take you to gel? You think about it, because you played, you've been playing these songs your whole life, but then there's other people coming in, and they're great musicians, but everyone has their own styles. They're used to something. How long does it take you guys?
We had like one sort of inbuilt advantage, which was certainly all the Irish musicians that we were using, who are all from this kind of like this, they're really like this sort of there's just been this wave of no, it's not a wave, it's an inundation of just really superlative talent coming out of Ireland, and they just keep coming, just people who are brilliant musicians, brilliant singers, brilliant songwriters and filmmakers and writers and poets and visual artists and all that sort of thing as well. But just on the strictly musical thing, all the Irish musicians that I sort of like got together to do this were all fans of the band, all fans of the Pogues. So it kind of like we were on a. It wasn't like any of this stuff was sort of strange to them. I think there's one thing I did notice. I've always noticed is any time when people have come in to sort of guest on Pogue songs, or decided to learn, they're gonna, we're gonna do this, we're gonna cover this Pogue song, do you want to play it with us? And it's like Pogue songs are far more complicated than anybody gives them credit for.
Right.
This is why it was so useful to be able to actually get James Fearnely over from Los Angeles, because they're like really, you get really kind of cars that were like made in the 50s, and you have to have someone who really knows what they're about to sort of like tinker around and sort of like get it running again. It's so it was, and I think everyone was primed for it to gel, and everyone is really good, and everyone was really excited to have been asked to do this. And it just fell into place like it was the most natural thing ever. I mean, they weren't all young Irish musicians either by any stretch. We had on that first go round for Red Roses for me, we had Jim Sklavounos from the Bad Seeds, but has also previously been in, he was in Sonic Youth, played in Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, that whole sort of New York no wave scene. And we also actually, the first time we had Jim wasn't necessarily, I think, hadn't been a sort of a Pogues fan when he was a teenager, but we also had George Majestica from the Bad Seeds, previously of Groove Armada, there you go. Who actually, as it turns out, was a fucking Pogues fan and had been when he was about sort of 17, 18, and was just like really, really. It was a joy to behold. George just having the time of his life. So it was a really good mixture of people. You know, Nadine Shah, who's also coming to the States and Canada. Not someone who's like part of the kind of new wave of Irish folk music by any stretch of the imagination, but is yet sufficient of a sort of a outlier and a law unto herself to be absolutely fit. You know, she's a perfect fit for this thing that we're doing. Anybody who's interested should check out the YouTube videos of Nadine singing the Old Triangle, particularly the version she did at Hackney, which was just astonishing. And the Dublin version's pretty damn good too, but the Hackney one was just like, what the fuck?
See, that's awesome when you find new musicians. You know, it's always funny. I do stand-up comedy, and every time you work with like a new act, and you're like, holy shit, they're so different, because us old guys, we get sort of stodgy. You know, we have our stuff. But you sit there and you go, wow, and you get a really fresh take, and you're like, man, that shit's funny. And you remember when you were young. You know, you remember when you were young, and you had that more balls, I think. It's just
there's this band in they've come from Brighton on the south coast they're called the New Eves. And they're an all-girl band. I'm not quite sure how they describe themselves. They're kind of like punky, folky, droney, kind of very much a law unto themselves. And I asked them to do, a couple of them, if they'd like to do Waxy's Dargle, but sing it as a duet. And we didn't really know what to expect from them at all. They turned up at the last day of rehearsals, because they'd been busy. So the first time they could make it was the last day of rehearsals. They turned up, there's just the two of them. They're sitting there quietly, not really, you know. And then we had a photographer coming down that day, and I thought that maybe that's the photographer and her assistant, because they hadn't sort of made themselves known to anyone. But no, it's the New Eves, or it was Ella and Violet from the New Eves, sorry. And they did Waxy's Dargle. I don't know how familiar you are with our stuff, but Waxy's Dargle on Red Roses for Me, which is this really frenetic kind of Dublin, kind of a drinking song, I suppose. Really, it's about Waxy's Dargle was the annual candle makers' ball. Waxy being a candle maker,
right.
And I guess a dargle is a dance. Anyway, and they came on, and they just like, but just this pair of sort of psychotic sort of hooligan fairies. It was utterly brilliant. They actually they captured the whole spirit of the band. Just these two girls just like went for it right for the throat, and it was utterly fucking brilliant. And just like, not what you'd have expected to see necessarily at a Pogues show, but every bit as fitting as, say, us doing it with Shane bellowing out the words and me sort of like cranking away on the tin whistle. You know, they were fantastic.
That's awesome.
So it was all that kind of thing. It was just people really bringing it and going for it.
Now, I want to ask you. You know, you were going to sing in the beginning. How does one end up deciding to play the tin whistle? You know, it's not like an instrument you think every day. Like my older brother played the drums. My sister played the cello and also the flugelhorn, which was a very odd combination. But how did you end up deciding to play the tin whistle?
Oh, it was I kind of in the original idea in the band was that both Shane and I were going to share the singing duties, but I just wasn't really up for it. I just didn't actually know how to sing in those days. I kind of thought it was enough to just like scream into a microphone, and there's probably a bit more to it than that, really. I've realised. So, and Shane said, you should try the whistle. It's easy. Like he could play one. And like, I mean, it's easy in the sense that it's an instrument. It's one of the easier instruments maybe to pick up and play a very simple tune on. There are people that can do things with the whistle that defy belief. You know, I'm not necessarily one of them.
Well, no, but you're good. I mean, you haven't.
Oh yeah, no. I'm talking about people who've been playing it since playing trad tunes since they were 4 years old and who are now 40. So
So how did the band get started? I always love how bands got originated because I'm a guy. I graduated college in '86, high school in '82. I was all around the whole '80s scene, and it was such great music for us. And in America it was different because we got MTV. We also had metal and we had rap, and it was such an amazing scene. What was it like before you started a band? What were your musical influences?
Well, I mean, the Pogues started in Pogues' first show was in I think September, October '82. So that's 5 years after a good sort of 5, getting on for 6 years really after punk exploded in London, at least anyway. And so I mean, I'd listened to a whole load of, I guess, the usual suspects, if you like, prior to punk happening. 76, 77, I think was a lot of people's heads just simply got turned around. You realised you could sort of that there was no sort of great mystery or secret to what these bands that you liked, to what they were doing. You could actually get up there and do it yourself. I think that was the most important takeaway from punk was the a lot of bands in the punk scene had actually been around before, could play kind of. You wouldn't necessarily say that. You could say maybe in some cases they wouldn't saw which way the wind was blowing and made the most of it. There were some bands who were just genuinely moved to sort of pick up guitars, whatever, and just start doing stuff because they were simply inspired to make noise, having never previously really thought too much about doing so. I'm thinking here. I think particularly people like the Slits. Who, as to the best of my knowledge, the Slits just simply they all decided, right, we're a band now, and this is what you do. This, you do that. I'll be, and I think that way of just going for it, just like making use of this sense of freedom, this sense of opportunity, just grabbing it. And running with it. It was we were inspired to start a band because Shane was already in a band. The Nips actually achieved a measure of success, certainly on the London circuit. People knew who they were, but it was just in the air still in '82, and it's continued, I think, for a good while afterwards as well. People were just forming bands. You formed a band because it was the thing to do. It was a thing that, it was very easy in those days to actually, if you had if you could sort of, if you like, in a musical sense, string sort of 2 or 3 sentences together, it was very easy to get shows. You could actually be, to continue the sort of like the metaphor, if you like, you could be almost pretty much mute and you could still get a gig because there were so many places where you could play. There were so many pubs that had stages. There were so many squats in London. It was very easy to put a roof over your head. It was very easy to claim the dole, which was not itself particularly generous, but you could claim the dole. You could work casually, like washing up or working, on a building construction site, something like that, and it was very easy to find places to rehearse. And as I say, very, very easy to find venues, places to play, or every college in London, of which there are many, really. They all had students' unions. They all had a certain amount of money to go towards putting on shows. It was, compared to the way things are nowadays, it was paradisical. And people will always make their spaces. People will always find a way of doing this, but back then it was really, really very easy. So everything was kind of like encouraging you to do this. So if you had something that was, we had something. How we started was I had a band that did 7 shows in 2 years, but Shane and we were just like, as far as we were concerned, we were a band. The fact that we basically never played wasn't really here nor there. We were a really fucking good band. We actually believed this, and it's and so it was us and Shane. Shane and our drummer were in a club in the West End in London, and basically announced that they were going to be playing a show of Irish rebel songs in this club the following weekend. And they said this to the manager, and he said, "Well, I can't actually fit you in next weekend, but if you come back in a month, then yeah, we can do something." And so we did that, and it was a total shambles, but there was something in there. There was a germ in there. Jem Finer was at that show as well, and it just like there was just something there that demanded to be that demanded germination.
So you start getting gigs. Now your shows are very, rowdy, they're fun. I mean, did you always feel comfortable on stage when you got up there? Because, a lot of people still to this day, people get nervous when they go on stage. Did you guys just click with the audiences when you started? Did you got them rowdy? How were your early live shows?
The first couple of shows, we were kind of essentially playing to captive audiences. The first show was a bunch of our friends. The second show that we did was supporting a band called King Kurt, who were a psychobilly as opposed to rockabilly band, who's had their own particularly and really fanatical and vociferous fans, but who kind of like knew Shane's old band. We were able. There was these first like 3 or 4 shows was a bit of a sort of like old fans of the Nips, friends of ours. And then because we were doing what we were doing, this kind of like London Irish amalgam of punk and the Dubliners, if you like, word spread amongst among kids, sort of like London Irish kids of Irish ancestry living in London, basically picked up on it, as well as did other people. And because we were really good live, we just acquired a reputation for being a band that it was worth going to see. But also we were doing all this Irish stuff, so we had something that set us apart.
So now how did you end up? You went on tour with The Clash, right? It was at '84.
No. We did one show supporting The Clash.
Okay, so how did that happen? Did they just see you and said they liked you?
Basically, I forget who it was, but the band they were playing Brixton Academy, and the band that was meant to be opening for them pulled out, so we got sort of drafted in at the 11th hour.
Now, back then, how did you go about getting a record deal? Because now, like, it sounds so funny when you hear a band puts out an album these days. Because it's not like how it is. Like when we used to get an album, we pick it up, we look at it, we'd be like, oh, there's liner notes, we'd be all excited, and it was hard for bands back then to get record deals until someone caught fire, like in LA or the metal scene. Someone got hot, so they signed everyone. How did you guys go about getting record deal?
Well, I mean, again, it was actually. If we hadn't been picked up, we would have ended up putting it out ourselves. We would have, put out records ourselves, which is in fact actually what we did with Dark Streets of London. That was initially released on our own label, but we were again very fortunate in the fact that Stiff Records existed. Stiff Records were founded by an Irish guy called Dave Robinson in about 1975. Towards the end of 1975, with a £400 loan from the manager of Dr. Feelgood, who were one of the best of the British pub rock bands. They weren't one of them; they were the best. They were actually the best of the sort of the pre-punk British bands. The Feelgoods were head and shoulders above the rest. And Dave. He just started signing these acts that basically wouldn't have got a look in at any major label, but people that he felt were certainly worth signing. He signed Ian Deary. He actually signed Madness. He signed Elvis Costello. The first punk single, the very, very first punk single, in the UK, New Rose by The Damned came out on Stiff. He actually, no, that was Chiswick put out the first Motorhead single. And Dave was also Irish. We had Stan Brennan, the guy who produced Red Roses for me, who with his friend Phil Gaston, ran the record store where Shane was working, and also ran Shane's band's record label, Soho Records, which I think, as far as I know, they only ever released the Nips stuff, which is about 4 or 5 singles. Stan was actually trying to get major labels interested in us because we were making a noise on the London gig circuit. The music press were covering us always very favorably. The major labels, who as usual just were like lagging behind everybody else and didn't really know what to do with us. Like, so Stan put it, I was kind of like throwing shit against a wall in the hope some of it would stick, and then Stiff, I think Stiff were alerted to us by Philip Chevron, who at that time was working in the record store that Shane worked in, had a sort of parent record store, which is where Philip was working. It's so complicated, and like it's like something out of the Byzantine Empire. Anyway, so Dave came down to see us and thought, yeah, I'm going to sign these guys, and so that's how it happened. But it was again, if you were sort of like if you were halfway decent, you'd get a deal.
Now,
back it really wasn't hard. Record labels had money. They were afraid of missing out on stuff. So, I mean, the only thing that had held us back was that I think we looked, and if you just like looked at us and at the instruments we were carrying, I guess maybe in their eyes, to a lot of the major labels, they thought, well, this is a folk band. This isn't a punk band. How can they be a punk band? They've got a banjo and an accordion, and that guy's got a tin whistle, It's like, yeah, well, think, guys, maybe,
It is crazy.
It doesn't necessarily have to be plugged in.
Now,
as it were.
You get the first album. Now, you have the 40 years coming out of the second album, Rum Sodomy, and the last. Now, because of the connection to Stiff, how did Elvis Costello end up producing that?
Well, again, actually, I think that was I know Phil Chevron again was the person who brought Elvis down to see us, which is how we got offered the slot, supporting him on the when we released Red Roses for me. We were, I forget which album he was touring, but we toured around the UK and Ireland with Elvis, and I think him recording the second album kind of became pretty much a done deal during that period. I think it was something he very much wanted to do, and it was something that seemed to make sense.
Now, as these albums are coming out, is your following getting bigger, and how are you?
Oh, by the time Rum Sodomy and the Lash comes out, I mean, like, yeah, we got pretty big pretty quickly. It was pretty seamless, really, until it started going wrong.
So, okay, now I want to talk about Fairy Tale.
Like a lot of bands.
Well, the funny thing is about bands is, they're together so... If you're together for like 7 or 8 years, when I did comedy in the late 80s, I was on the road for like 7 years. It burns the shit out of you. But if there's like a bunch of you and you're a bigger group and you're on the road and you're working together all the time, you have to get tired of it. It's just normal. You have to get tired of each other. And that's what a lot of times people don't understand.
I mean, that wasn't ever really the case with us. I think that sometimes people sort of seem to have picked up this idea that there was, bad blood and all the rest of it. And that really wasn't the case at all. I think that there were individual members of the band, notably Shane, just got burnt out by endlessly touring. It wasn't so much spending time in the company of the same people, but it was just like, I don't think Shane ever really enjoyed being away from home all that much in the first place. So being like, when we put out Fall from Grace with God, I think we toured something like 250 shows in a calendar year. That's too much. might have been more than that. And yeah, so you get really, really, people can get really sick of doing that, obviously. And it plays havoc with the
What did you like? What did you like about touring?
It was just, I don't know, the sort of dark energy of it. I always really enjoyed it. I didn't find it tiring. I didn't sort of. I just like being out there. I like traveling around the place. I like doing the shows. I like everything that came with it. You know.
Okay, on your third album, Fairy Tale of New York comes out, which that song. Yeah, I remember the first time I really heard that. I was in L.A. I just got divorced. My buddy came over for Christmas, and there was me and him and another guy who just got divorced. And he was from Norway, and he brought a bottle of Akavik, and he's like, you have to listen to this. And it really hit me. And now, because I'm remarried, I listen to it, and it makes me happy. But what do you think made that song so special? I mean, what was it just that? I mean, because it's really a popular Christmas song. I mean, it blew up the charts. What makes that song special in your eyes?
Well, the people's just good. I think I think it resonates with a lot of people. I think a lot of people actually just simply find it quite funny as well. You can't overlook that. I think it's nice. It's nice is maybe not. I don't know if nice is necessarily the right word, but yeah, let's go with that. It's kind of nice to have something that isn't all about sort of like, oh, everything is just sweetness and light, and isn't it wonderful? We're all simply having a wonderful Christian time. Where a lot of people, Christmas is just shit, and life is shit. But I don't really actually. I think it's. I don't think it's even really. I don't think people sort of, oh, I like this song because it reminds me that life is shit. I think it's more. It's this kind of. Got this kind of like, yeah, life is shit, but fuck it, there's a glorious defiance to it, and it kind of has a happy ending. We hope.
Well, no, it puts you in a good mood. Now, when you're part,
I think the happy ending is kind of implied,
Well, it's just. I mean, I don't think it doesn't remind me. I mean, it reminds me of a good time that I was going through a bad time, but I heard it gave me a good time. Now, your tin whistle part, your part in that. Did Shane write that for you, or did you just add that, or how did that? I mean, how did it work with the tin whistle? Where because I always listen to songs, and there's so many different people in a band. Were you guys did he start jamming, and then you played that part? How did that come about?
All the tin whistle parts became. I mean, a lot of the time I'm sort of following the vocal melody or something akin to the vocal melody, but. No one ever told me, "Oh, no, play this here." I always played what seemed to work in the context of the song, whether that be sort of something that's not following a particular melody line that's already there, or coming up with one of my own. Yeah.
So now, after you guys broke the first time, how did Joe Strummer end up coming involved with you?
Well, Joe, we knew Joe because we'd met him actually when we'd met him in fact when we opened for the Clash, back as you were referring to, way back then, and then when we were in Straight to Hell, Joe was also in Straight to Hell. Joe was in Walker, the movie that I did in Nicaragua in 1987. And I think it was actually 87 or 80. No, it was 88. I think that Joe first played with us. Philip was sick. He had an ulcer that sort of flared up. So Joe joined us on a North American tour playing guitar, and then subsequently produced Hell's Ditch. And then we had to sack Shane in Japan because he clearly no longer wanted to do it anymore. And so we were a bit stuck. And I'm not quite sure how it came about, but we ended up with Joe Strummer as our singer, which was, a window closes and a door opens.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned the movie Straight to Hell.
Yeah.
Okay, my friend Xander Berkeley was in that. I don't know if you know Xander.
Oh, right. Yeah, Xander, yeah.
Xander's done my show a few times. In fact, I just posted a post about Elvis Costello's one album came out, and he told this great story. So as soon as you said that, because Xander said that was great because he believes Costello was on that shoot too, right? There's a bunch of musicians.
Yes, he was. Yeah, very much so, yeah.
So how'd you get involved in that? Because that's pretty cool with musicians and actors. It was like a western.
That was Alex Cox. Who directed the Para Brown Eyes video, the guy who did Repo Man and Straight to Hell. And so originally, I mentioned the movie Walker, which Xander Berkeley was also in, as was Joe Strummer, which was about set in Nicaragua in the 1850s about a guy called William Walker, an American guy who took the country over for a brief while in the 1850s. Ed Harris played William Walker in the film. So I'm sorry, I've lost my thread. Alex Cox.
About how you got involved with Straight to Hell.
Oh yeah. Straight to Hell. So right. The original idea was that we had been going to all be in what later on became Walker. Alex was going to shoot that in Mexico, and that fell through. And so that very swiftly sort of got turned around, and it was decided instead that we were going to shoot this Western that him and Joe and this guy, Dick Rude, who's one of the actors in the film, his real name's Richard Greenberg, they'd written in 3 days around a swimming pool in Los Angeles. Only the best films are written in those. Maybe it was around a swimming pool in Spain, actually. I don't know. Anyway, and so essentially that's what happened. We found ourselves in Spain rather than Mexico, doing this psychotic, deranged spaghetti western pastiche.
That's just so great. As I said, entertainment intertwines so much, And so, and you meet Joe. Well, okay, so after Joe tours, then you guys get a reunion again. How did you guys get back together after all those years when you started touring? What was in 2014? How did the band get back?
Essentially, the guy who had been the band's accountant, Anthony Addis, who was at the time actually managing Muse, but was still our accountant, had always kept an eye on how our records were selling, and noticed that, particularly the compilations were the best ofs and everything were maintaining a steady sort of like a good steady flow of sales. And he went to Simon Moran, who's a big promoter in the UK, who put on the Rum Sotheby and the Lash tour that we just did, and said, "What do you think about getting the Pogues back together?" And Simon was, "Yes, let's do it. So this was, I think we were one of the, after Blondie, I think we were one of the first, everyone's doing reunions and has been now for the last 25 years odd. And I think we were one of the first after Blondie who absolutely did it first.
Now,
so that was just like a question really of Anthony reaching out to, I think he went to Jem first of all and said, "Are you interested in doing this?" And Jem said, "Yeah," and spoke to Shane and myself and the others, and yeah.
How did the crowds react when you came back? Because you have to be happy because you see this live on your audio, you see this band, and all of a sudden you can take your kids to see this band, and you're like, "Oh, this is what I saw." I mean, how is it coming on stage?
This has been one of the brilliant things about the Pogues, ever since the reunions, and this is still going on now with these kind of I don't quite know what to show them, so to call them, sorry, these the expanded Pogues orchestra shows. One of the things that we noticed back in sort of 2001 was that, yeah, sure, there's plenty of people around who are obviously, veterans from the 1980s. Some of them have got their kids with them. Okay, that's cool. But there were a lot of younger people there anyway, who weren't there with their mums and dads or their, whatever. And I think we've always been able to sort of, there's always been a sort of a certain number of people who've kind of like, with each subsequent generation, if you like, who picked up on the Pogues. There's like a lot, there's certain bands seem to get handed down, Clash, Joy Division, but people, you know what I mean, people like that. And I think we're one of those bands. And I think it's a testament to, I mean, obviously Shane's songwriting, in large part, and the way and the band's songwriting, the way the band sounded. I think it's something that people have always found sort of. There's nothing stale. If you listen to, say, Rum Sodomy and the Lash or Red Roses, for me, they don't sound in any way like honest. It's a bit dated, and it is a little bit difficult to sound dated when you're doing a 200-year-old wailing song. I mean, it's like. Being whether you're dated or not doesn't really sort of it rather goes out of the window, because I mean what you're doing is, in effect, you've actually sort of said, well, this song that we're doing now actually is timeless, because here we are in 1986 or 2025, and it's sounding as good as it did in the 1840s, possibly better, because we got better equipment than they had then. That's a subjective judgment, obviously.
Now, are you acclimating and singing more now? Are you getting used to it?
Yeah. I mean, I've spent quite a long time now singing Pogue songs.
But I mean, is it something that, do you have to learn how to be in front? It's because it's something that people knew you and they knew Shane was before. I mean, so what is it like for you when you go up? Does the crowd?
Well, we were kind of. Back in the old days, there was kind of almost like dual frontmen anyway. We sort of play off each other, so it's not. There's nothing new for me or strange for me about standing, as it were, sort of fronting the band. And also, it becomes very, very easy when you've got these people with you who are just like such. The people we've got playing with us, the musicians and the singers. I mean, like they're all such towering figures. They're all so good that I'm just sort of like delighted to be able to say, right, okay, please welcome Nadine Shah, Lisa O'Neill, John Francis Flynn, Iona Zajac. Look at who we've got playing. Look who we've got playing bass. Look who we've got playing banjo. Look who we've got playing the uilleann pipes. And here's Jem and James and me. And look who's on the drums. It's like it's fantastic. It's actually a joy to be able to do it.
Now, how excited are you to come to the States? Are you looking forward to coming to the States?
I'm really, really excited about coming to the States. This has been building for a while now.
Now, when's the last time you were in the States?
The last time I was in the States, well, it was about 3 weeks ago, actually.
I mean, performing.
Oh, performing. The last time I would have been in the States performing would have been with the when I was playing with the Cajun band from New Orleans, and we were. It was called Poguetry. We were doing. I thought it'd be a good idea to get a Cajun band doing Pogue songs, because the instrumentation is kind of similar, and there's a sort of so that would have been, I think the last time that happened was 2022.
Now, what can we expect on this tour? What kind of show are you going to put on? How long is the show going to be? Do you guys already have your set list set, or is it every night it's going to be different, or what's going to happen?
Well, because we're doing a couple of festivals on this tour, obviously those sets are going to have to be slightly shorter, so there are a couple of sets where we're actually going to have to sort of decide what songs we're not going to do. As to the others, though, the full-length ones, if you like, we have to sort of, Rum Sodomy and the Lash on its own is just simply not long enough. I mean, it's only, I think its running time is about just over 40 minutes, maybe something like that, around the 40-minute mark. So what we've done is we've kind of like using the expanded version as it appears on, sinful saying this, but Spotify. which incorporates the Poetry for Motion EP. And then we're also going to do some stuff from Red Roses for Me, some of the more sort of like the bangers, if you like, the sort of crowd pleasers. What we won't be doing yet is anything from any album post Poetry in Motion. You'll have to wait for the next time for that.
Okay. Well, I got one more question before we go. I always ask my guests this. You've had a great career. You know, you've been in the arts, and you've been in movies. You've been in a movie with Xander Berkeley, for Christ's sake. 2 of them.
Right, yeah.
What, looking back at your career, and it can be personal, it can be professional, what makes you proud? When you look back, and as we're all getting older, what makes you proud about your career and your life?
Well, I mean, there's actually a couple of things, but I think really, especially given what it is that we're talking about here and what it is that we're going to be doing, I think the fact that that there are all these fantastic new bands from Ireland, and so many of them cite us as an influence, as a reason that they're doing what they're doing, or as being a very important part of their musical what's the word, upbringing, whatever, the sort of something that's inspired them to sort of to carry on and do what they do, because there's so many such superlative talents coming out of that country at the moment that I'm very proud. If we played any part at all in doing that, then I'm very proud of that. I'm also, and I'm proud that we at least made a noise about getting the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6 out of jail.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. This was great. People, go to Pogues.com. You can find out their dates. They start their tour in America in September. Please check them out. Also, go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 1,040 episodes. Email me at cooper@coopertalk.net. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.